Interlude. A minor prophecy. Father Chains sat on the roof of the house of Perilandro, staring down at the astonishingly arrogant 14-year-old that had grown out of the little orphan he had purchased so many years before from the thief-maker of Shades Hill. "Someday, Locke Lamora," he said, "someday you're going to fuck up so magnificently, so ambitiously, so overwhelmingly, that the sky will light up and the moon will spin, and the gods themselves will shit comets with glee. And I just hope I'm still around to see it." "Oh, please," said Locke. "That'll never happen." Epilogue. False Light. Section 1. The 18th of Parthas, in the 78th year of Azagila, wet Komori summer. The whole city had a hangover, and the sky did too. Warm rain was falling in sheets, spattering and steaming in the glow of false light. The water caught the false light glimmer like layers of shifting, translucent mirrors, and formed split-second works of art in the air. But men cursed it anyways, because it made their heads wet. "What, Sergeant? What, Sergeant Vidrick?" The man yelling outside Vidrick's station at the south end of the Narrows was another watchman. Vidrick stuck his lean, weathered face out through the window beside the shack's door and was rewarded with a stream of runoff on his forehead. Thunder boomed overhead. "What is it, son?" The watchman approached out of the rain. It was Constanzo, the new lad, just shifted in from the north corner. He was leading a gentle's donkey. Behind the donkey was an open-topped cart, with two more yellow-jacketed watchmen at its rear. They huddled in their oil cloaks and looked miserable, which meant they were sensible men. "Found something, Sergeant," said Constanzo. "Something pretty fucked." Teams of yellow jackets and black jackets had been combing the south of Komor since the previous night. Rumors were swirling of some sort of assassination attempt at Ravensreach. Gods only knew what the spider thought his boys should be doing, turning over stones in the dregs and the asphalt districts. But Vedrick was used to never hearing the whys and wherefores. "Define pretty fucked," he yelled, as he slipped into his oil cloak and threw up the hood. He stepped out into the rain and crossed to the donkey cart, waving to the two men standing behind it. One of them owed him 2 barons from the previous week's dicing. "I'll have a look," said Constanzo, sweeping back the wet blanket that covered the donkey cart's cargo. Beneath it was a man, youngish, very pale, balding, with a fuzz of stubble on his cheeks. He was fairly well dressed, in a grey coat with red cuffs. It happened to be spattered with blood. The man was alive, but he lay in the cart with his fingerless hands pressed against his cheeks, and he stared up at Vidrick without a speck of sane comprehension in his eyes. "Arrgh!" he moaned, as the rain fell on his head. "Arrgh!" His tongue had been cut out. A dark scar covered the stump at the bottom of his mouth, oozing blood. "Arrgh!" "Sweet fucking Perilandro," said Vidrick. "Tell me I don't see what I see on his wrists." "It's a bondsmaid, Sergeant," said Constanzo. "It is, or it was." He threw the soaked blanket back over the man's face and reached inside his oil cloak. "There's more. Shut you inside?" Vidrick led Constanzo back into his shack. The two men swept their hoods back, but didn't bother taking their cloaks off. Constanzo pulled out a piece of folded parchment. "We found this fella tied to a floor over an ashfall," he said. "Pretty goddamn weird. His parchment was on his chest." Vidrick took it and unfolded it to read. "Personal attention to the Duke's spider. For return to Carthage." "Gods," he said. "A real Carthani bondsmage." Looks like he won't be recommending Camor to his friends. What do we do with him, Sergeant? Vidric sighed, folded the letter, and passed it back to Constanzo. We pass the coin, lad, he said. Pass this fucking coin right up the chain of command, and we forget we ever saw it. Haul him to the Palace of Patience. Let someone else give it a ponder. Section 2. False light glimmered on the rain-rippled water of Camor Bay, as Donna Angiovesta Forcenza, Dowager Countess of Amberglass, stood on the dock, huddled in a fur-lined oilcloak, while teams of men with wooden poles prowled through a barge full of rain-sodden shit beneath her. The smell was attention-grabbing. "Sorry, my lady," said the watch sergeant at her left hand. "We're positive there's nothing on the other 2 barges. We've been at this one for 6 hours. I sincerely doubt that anything will turn up. We will, of course, continue our efforts." Donna Forcenza sighed deeply and turned to look at the carriage that stood on the dock behind her. Drawn by 4 black stallions and framed with alchemical running lights in the Forcenza colors, the door was open. Don and Donna Salvara sat inside, peering out at her, along with Captain Reynard. She beckoned to them. Reynard was the first to reach her side. As usual, he wore no oilcloak, and he bore the heavy rain with stiff-necked stoicism. The Salvaras were sensibly covered up against the downpour. Lorenzo held up a silk parasol to shield his wife even further. "Let me guess," said Reynard. "They're full of shit." "I'm afraid so," said Donna Forcenza. "Thank you for your time, Watch Sergeant. You're dismissed. You may call your men out of the barge as well. I don't believe we'll be needing them anymore." As the greatly relieved Yellow Jackets filed away down the dock, wooden poles held very carefully on their shoulders, Donna Forcenza seemed to shudder and gasp. She put her hands to her face and bent forward. "Donna Forcenza!" cried Sophia, rushing forward to grab her by the shoulders. As they all bent close around her, she suddenly straightened up and cackled, gasping in air between bursts of dry-sounding laughter. She shook with it. Her tiny fists punched the air before her. "Oh, gods!" she gasped. "This is too much!" "What? Donna Forcenza, what's the matter?" Reynard grabbed her by the arm and peered at her. "The money, Stephen," she chuckled. "The money was never anywhere near this place. The little bastard had us digging through shit barges purely for his own amusement. The money was on board the Satisfaction." "How do you figure that?" "Wasn't it plain? It's all striking me from so many directions at once. Caparazza assisted with the charitable contributions to the plague ship, yes?" "He did." "Not from any sense of charitable duty, but because he needed a means to move his fortune out to the frigate." "Out to a plague ship?" said Donna Sophia. "That wouldn't do him any good." "It would if there was no plague," said Donna Forcenza. "The plague was a lie." "But," said Don Lorenzo, "why was Lucas so adamant about sinking that ship? Was it simple pique? If he couldn't have it, no one could?" "His name was Callus, Lorenzo dear. Tavern Callus." "Whichever, darling," said Lorenzo. 45,000 crowns, plus whatever Barsavi's fortune came to. It's a great deal of money to put out of everyone's grasp forever." "Yes," said Donna Forcenza. "And he told us why he was doing it while he stood there. Ah, damn me for a fool." "I fear," said Donna Sophia, "I speak for the rest of us when I say we don't follow." "The Thorn said he was a priest of the 13th, she said. "The heresy of the nameless 13th, the crooked warden, the god of thieves and malefactors? For propriety's sake," he said. "For propriety's sake. He said that on purpose." She laughed again, biting down on her knuckles to contain herself. "Oh, gods! Anatolius killed 3 of his friends, so don't you see? There was no danger on that ship. He didn't want it sunk to save Camor. It was a death offering, Stephen. A death offering. Reynard slapped one hand against his forehead. Water flew. Yes, said Donna Forcenza, and I sank it for him, in 60 fathoms of shark-infested water, neat as you please. So, said Don Lorenzo, all of our money is 360 feet down, on the bottom of Old Harbor? I'm afraid so, said Donna Forcenza. So what do we do now? Donna Forcenza sighed and meditated for a few moments. First, she said when she looked back up at the Salvaras, all the truths behind this affair will be declared state secrets of the Duchy of Camor. I bind you all to silence concerning them. The Thorn of Camor is a myth. The money he allegedly stole never existed. The Duke's spider never took any formal interest in the matter. But, said Donna Sofia, they told Lorenzo that's how the Thorn guarantees his secrecy, when they stole into our house dressed as midnighters. Yes, said her husband. One of the false midnighters specifically told me that the Thorn relied on the embarrassment of his victims to keep his thefts secret from other potential victims. I don't think that part was a lie. Oh, I'm sure it wasn't, said Donna Forcenza. But nonetheless, that's just what we're going to do. In time, you'll come to understand that a state like ours cannot afford to offer up a show of weakness for honesty's sake. Duke Nicovante charges me with vouchsafing his security, not his conscience. The Salvaras stared at her, saying nothing. Oh, don't look so glum, she said. Your real punishment for getting involved in this mess has not yet begun. Come back to Amberglass with me, and let's talk about the penalty. Our punishment, Donna Forcenza, said Lorenzo hotly. Our punishment was nearly 17,000 crowns. Haven't we been punished enough? Not nearly, said Donna Forcenza. I've decided who's to inherit the title of Countess Amberglass when it's my time to pass on. She paused for just a moment before continuing. Or should I say Count and Countess Amberglass? What? Sophia squeaked like a girl of 8. A particularly squeaky girl of 8, much accustomed to squeaking loudly. It's no blessing, said Donna Forcenza. Comes with a job. Okay. You can't be serious, said Don Lorenzo. There are 24 families on the Alcagrante, with more rank and honor than ourselves. The Duke would never name us to Amberglass before them. I believe I know Nicovante somewhat better than you do, young man, said Donna Forcenza, and I believe the inheritance is mine to dictate. But the job, said Donna Salvara. You can't mean... Of course I do, Sophia. I can't live forever. Each time something like this affair lands in my lap, I suddenly recall that I don't want to live forever. Let someone else play the spider. We've deceived everyone for all these years, letting them think the office was held by a man. Now let us deceive them further by passing it on to 2 individuals. She put her arm through Reynard's and allowed him to help her back toward the carriage. You'll have Stephen to help you, and to run your operations. He'll serve as the link between you and the Midnighters. You both have acceptably malleable wits. Given just a few more years, I'm sure I can whip the 2 of you into something resembling the shape I require. And then, said Donna Sofia. And then, my dear, all these goddamn crises will be yours to deal with. Donna Forcenza sighed. Old sins will never be buried so deep that you cannot rise again when least expected. And so you'll pay for the good of Camor with the coin of your own conscience, parceled out year after year, until that purse is empty at last. Section 3. Master Lamora, cried Evelius, this is entirely unacceptable. The sea at false light was a surging field of grey and green. The waves rolled and crashed around the galleon, golden gain. one of the only 2 vessels that had bothered to put out from Lamora that evening, bound for Talisham, and thence to Talvarar. The wind wailed in the shrouds and sails of the elderly vessel, and sailors in oilcloaks hurried here and there on the decks, muttering private prayers to Iona, lord of the grasping waters. Locke Lamora lay on a pile of tarp-covered crates on the galleon's raised stern deck, bundled in blankets, within oilcloths, within tarps, like a sausage roll. Nothing of him was visible but his abnormally pale and heavily bruised face, poking out of the layers around him. Jean Tannen sat at his side, bundled against the rain, but not to the point of immobility. "Master Abelius," said Locke in a weak voice, made nasal by his broken nose. "Each time I have left Cumorah, I have done it by land. This is something new. I wanted to see it one last time." "You are very near death, Master Lamora," said Abelius. "It is foolish for you to be larking about on the deck in this weather." "Abelius," said Jean, "if what Locke is doing were larking about, corpses could get jobs as acrobats. Can we have a moment's peace?" "From the attentions that have sustained his life this past day, by all means, young masters, enjoy your sea view, and on your heads be it." Abelius stomped off across the rolling deck, sliding in this direction and that, quite unaccustomed to life at sea. Cumorah was diminishing behind them, fading gradually between shifting curtains of rain. False light rose up from the lower city like an aura above the waves. The 5 towers shone ghostly beneath the churning sky. The wake of the galleon seemed to gleam with phosphorescence, a roiling false light of its own. They sat on the stern deck and watched the dark horizon swallow the city behind them. "I'm sorry, Locke," said Jean. "Sorry I couldn't be more useful to you at the end." "The hell are you talking about? You killed Sharon and Reza. I could never have done that. You pulled me out of the floating grave, you hauled me back to Abelius, and got another lovely fucking poultice smeared all over me. What do you have to apologize for, besides the poultice?" "Well, I'm a liability," he said. "My name? I've been using my real name all my life. I never thought it'd come to anything bad." "What, the bonds mage? Gods, Jean. Take a false name wherever we end up. Tavern Callus is good. Let the bastard pop up all over the place. The Order of Azagila will have a surfeit of miracles to cherish." "I tried to kill you, Locke. I'm sorry. I couldn't do anything about it." "You didn't try to kill me, Jean. The Falconer did. You couldn't do anything about it. Gods. I'm the one with his arm slashed open and his shoulder punched in. You're over there moping. Enough." Thunder rumbled in the clouds overhead, and there was the sound of shouted orders from the forward deck of the ship. "Jean," said Locke, "you're a greater friend than I ever could have imagined before I met you. I owe you my life too many times over to count. I would rather be dead myself than lose you, and not just because you're all that I have left." Jean said nothing for several minutes. They stared north across the iron sea as the whitecaps lashed one another with an increasing tempo. "Sorry," said Jean. "My mouth sort of ran away with me." "Thanks, Locke." "Well, cheer up. At least you've got more mobility than a fucking tadpole on dry land. Look at my little oilcloth castle." Locke sighed. "So this is winning," he said. "It is," replied Jean. "Well, it can go fuck itself," said Locke. They passed another few minutes in silence and rain. "Locke?" said Jean at last, hesitantly. "Yes?" "If you don't mind my asking, what is your real name?" "Oh, gods." Locke smiled weakly. "Can't I have any secrets?" "You know mine." "Yeah, but you've only got the one anyway." That's not a fair point. Oh, fine, said Locke. Get over here. Jean stumbled over to the pile of crates on which Locke was lying, and bent down to put his ear near Locke's mouth. Locke whispered 5 syllables, and Jean's eyes widened. You know, he said, I'd have gone with Locke in preference to that myself. Yeah, tell me about it. The galleon rode south before the winds of the storm, and the last few glimmers of false light faded behind them. The lights drew down into the darkness, and then they were gone for good, and the rain swept in like a wall above the surface of the sea. And that's the end of the book, my dear. Get some sleep. I love you so much. And the kids sing good night, and they love you too. This one ended up here in my lap. And Pan's still over in his little bed over there, being a brat. Good night, dear. We all love you.